I have to say something that might be unpopular with certain listeners. I don't care for the Young Bucks. They almost feel like, how can I describe this? If the ultimate Smarky Mark fan could create their own wrestler, that's who they'd create, those two guys. Or if they could be wrestlers, they'd be those two guys. I don't know. There's something that doesn't sit right with me.
I like Matt and Nick.
I'm sure they're nice guys.
They're nice guys, and also they're tremendous athletes, and they do some great shit. And they are battling a size issue. They're neither one, and I'm not just talking about tall, but I'm talking about, one of the toughest guys ever in the history of wrestling, Luther Lindsay, who was Stu Hart's favorite shooter. And was one of the toughest guys legitimately ever in wrestling. I think was like 5'8" or whatever. They don't have to be tall, and they don't have to be, steroid monsters. But you have to have some physical,
I think I have Lance Storm
like you whip somebody.
Lance Storm's a good example of that because I think he's only 5'8" or 5'9", but he's fucking jacked.
No, Lance is taller than that, believe it or not. Lance, I think, is about my height. I think
no, because I stood next to him. I don't think so.
Well, okay, Lance, Twitter us. What is your exact height, Lance? 'Cause I think he's my height, and I'm 6 feet even. But point being, Ricky Morton, 5'9", 205 pounds on his best day, probably. It wasn't a physical monster. He could sell to make up for it. But at the same time, you've got a lot of guys in the business these days. I remember I was scared of professional wrestlers, even when I first got in the business as a photographer, but especially as a fan. Joe LeDuc scared the shit out of me. Terry Funk scared the shit out of me after I'd gotten in the business. But you have to, if you're going to be a professional athlete in a business where supposedly the object is to whip somebody in some type of combat sport, you have to have some prepossessing physical, nature like that. So the Young Bucks are working with a handicap in that they look so young. They look much younger than they are. And they're not huge, so they've got to rely on their speed and their technique and their teamwork and etc. And they do quite well with that, and they're tremendous athletes, but they do so much stuff that doesn't beat people, that they actually work against themselves in some cases. And I'm not talking about, once again, for the 400 people in a rec center. I'm talking about on a mainstream basis. If you have an arena with thousands of people in it, and those are rarer and rarer than ever before in wrestling, most of those people are going to say, well, I could whip that fucking guy. And if you don't do something to compensate for that by having a dynamite finishing move that looks like it could knock the shit out of you and work, then you're as Dutch men tell you, say you're backing up. If they do some shit that looks like it could kill anybody, and then they kick out and they do some more shit. So I don't know what to take. I don't know what to say.